Walking along the path, Seraphim takes in the sweet scent of the flowers decorating Floribel Way. The plants become more decorative the closer she came to her home. The modest home boasted the simple luxuries, or so she was taught. Laura greeted her at the gate cheerfully at the front gate of their personal garden. "Miss, welcome home," she says, grabbing the staff from Seraphim. "I'll assume your training session was a success?" "Yes, Alara, it was indeed." Seraphim smiled to herself, remembering the final flip of the training. "Miss," Alara interrupted, "Mistress Jolene Inya is waiting for you in the den." "Thank you, Alara." She hands the bag of training materials to Alara. "Please inform my mother that I will join her momentarily." Seraphim knew that her mother wouldn't appreciate it if she sat anywhere in her pristine home covered in dirt from the training grounds. Seraphim has received one too many scoldings over the years. Seraphim walks into the bathhouse situated to the north side of the home. Thankfully, her attendant Maribeth prepared the steaming water for her return from training. Seraphim strips the filthy, sweat-stained, dirt-covered clothes, dropping them next to the door. The relief escapes her in a sigh as she slides into the hot bath. The next several minutes are spent washing up with the lavender eucalyptus soap, made specially by her family. As she does after every training session, Seraphim examines every inch of her body for bruises, scrapes, or evidence of the hard work she put in that morning. Dissatisfied to not find a single mark, she rinses the last of the soap from her hair before stepping out of the bath. Next to the dressing table, Maribeth left a blue cotton dress that Seraphim slides on over her slip. The hem of the dress stopped just about her ankles. She adds the simple green vest over the dress, tying the light corset tight. Satisfied that she is presentable enough, Seraphim joins her mother Jolenia in the den. "Hello, Mother. Laura said you needed to speak with me." Seraphim greets her by taking her hand and placing a kiss on the back lightly. She looked up to see the apparent agitation as she moved to take her seat across from Jolenia on the chaise lounge chair. Jolenia sighs impatiently as Seraphim's gaze moves about the room. The room is decorated in simple greens, accented with gold to give an air of elegance. "Simple luxury is what we must portray," Jolenia always says. Dark cherry furniture adorned the room with the accent carvings. As a refined woman, Jolenia is dressed in a dark gray velvet and lace. "Yes, Seraphim, I summoned you an hour ago. You know how I feel about promptness, my dear." She scrutinizes the simple dress Seraphim is wearing. Seraphim shifts uncomfortably in the chaise lounge and smooths the non-existent creases from her skirt of the dress. "Mother, you know I have just returned from training. I also know that my previous appearance of sweat and dirt had received a stern lecture, so I took the utmost care to be presentable for you." She holds her head in a saccharine grin, doing her best to keep her tone pleasant but to the point. "Very well, Seraphim. While I don't appreciate your delay, I do appreciate your learning from your past mistakes. I have been anxious because I have something important to discuss with you," Jolenia began, her voice calm yet tinged with a hint of formality. Seraphim nodded, her heart already sensing the weight of her mother's words. "Please proceed, Mother. You have my undivided attention. As you know, I met with the council this morning while you were training. We have been awaiting this decision since Harriet was named to Setheron, as you know. So after careful consideration and considerable deliberations," Jolenia looked at Seraphim. Jolenia looked joyfully at Seraphim before she continued, "I have finally received an engagement proposal for you." Surprise flickered from Seraphim's face. An engagement proposal, she quietly echoed, her mind racing from the implications. From who? Jolinia inclined her head slightly. From a member of the Celestial Patrons, she replied evenly. Seraphim's thought whirled. The Celestial Patrons, a respected title in Elysium, known for their contributions to the community and their lineage. She had known them for years, as their paths had crossed on several occasions during gatherings and festivals. Yet the prospect of courtship with one felt sudden and daunting. We believe this could be a promising match, Jolinia continued, her gaze steady on Seraphim. He is a capable young man, committed to his responsibilities and his future. Seraphim nodded slowly, absorbing her mother's words. When will we meet formally? Jolinia smiled at Seraphim gently. During the upcoming Petalora festival. She took Seraphim's hand in hers reassuringly before she continued. It will be an opportunity for you both to get to know each other better and to discuss your future. Seraphim looked at her mother and nodded again, her mind already beginning to assess what this meant. She took a breath to steady herself and all at once racing thoughts. All of her aspirations, her trials, and her own desires flashed quickly before her. Jolinia let go of her hand, and Seraphim forced a small smile. I understand, Mother, she replied softly, her voice tinged with both apprehension and acceptance. This is a significant step, my dear. At once, taking Seraphim's hand between both of hers, she looked deeply into Seraphim's eyes. Take your time to consider everything before the festival. Your happiness and future are paramount. Seraphim nodded gratefully, a mixture of emotions swirling within her. As she left the room, she knew that her journey was taking a new turn, one that would test her convictions, challenge her plans, and perhaps lead her to unexpected discoveries about herself and her place in Elysium. Sarah! Sarah, where are you? Harriet shouted down the hall, bouncing into their shared bedroom later that evening. Harriet found Seraphim braiding her hair for bed. Ah, sister, there you are. Harriet beamed at Seraphim's reflection in the mirror as she wrapped her arms around her for a hug from behind. Seraphim rolled her eyes, but leaned into her embrace. Where else would I be? She turned herself around as Harriet danced about the room and hummed to herself a song she created. As she moved about the room, Seraphim's mood lightened. She had still been ruminating on the information her mother had presented earlier that day. Seraphim turned back to the mirror as she finished brushing her hair. Sarah, I never truly know where you are, especially if you're hiding from our mother or off training for that thing again. She practically spat the words. Seraphim rolled her eyes at Harriet's obvious distaste for the arborist's trials. Harriet finally flopped onto the bed and stared up at the ceiling in deep contemplation. She sighed heavily, and Seraphim turned to face her once again. Harriet moved to a sitting position, looking at Seraphim's face. Why are you so against the engagement ceremonies anyways? She lay back again, her long hair spilling out about her head like a halo. They are magical, you know. Everything is about you and your betrothed. No more hiding in these cotton rags or outdated velvet pieces that mother wears. Seraphim absently rubbed the inside of her left wrist, where her skin remained bare, a stark reminder of what was to come. Soon after the Luminalis festival, the betrothal stars would appear. 3 small black stars marking her union with the one the elders had chosen for her. The trio of stars, once imprinted, would bind her fate, a symbol not just of duty, but of the future she would share with her betrothed. They said the stars were powerful, enchanted to connect soulmates, and if by some rare chance she touched the one destined for her, those stars would shift, turning into brilliant rainbow hues that would never fade. It all sounded so grand, so inevitable, but the idea of being tethered by magic to someone she hadn't even met left Seraphim feeling more anxious than excited. The stars weren't just a mark, they were a promise, and one she wasn't sure she was ready to fulfill. Seraphim smiled wanly. Ree, I loved the pageantry and the romanticism associated with it. But that was when I was little and I didn't know how much I wanted to be an arborist. Harriet rolled onto her side to face Seraphim again. And the parties, you used to love the parties. Seraphim turned to see her sister's face flush with excitement. She wanted to share that level of excitement for her own betrothal, but she was much more anxiety-filled than she had anticipated. Ree, I had news today, and I'm not sure how to feel ill. You're right, I used to love the parties. Harriet smiled brightly at that. Seraphim also smiled, but it immediately turned wistful. Used to is the key. I don't know, Harriet. It's just not me. I'm happy you're happy with this. Setheron is good for you. He always has been. You're perfect together. It's just this arranged marriage thing wouldn't work for me. Harriet frowned, a look of confusion crossing her features. But why? Isn't it romantic to have everything planned out? To know who you'll spend your life with? Seraphim sighed, her thoughts heavy with the news she had received earlier. It's more complicated than that. Mother informed me that I have a pending engagement, too. Harriet's eyes widened in surprise. What? With whom? One of the celestial patrons, Seraphim replied, the title feeling foreign yet significant on her tongue. I'm supposed to meet him formally at the Pedalora festival. Harriet's expression shifted from surprise to excitement. A celestial patron? Aren't they from some of the most respected families in Elysium? This is amazing, Sarah. Why aren't you happy about it? Seraphim continued braiding her hair, twisting it into a low bun for the night. She paused, considering her words carefully. I don't know how to explain it, Harriet, but doing the trials just feels right. Ever since I watched Sylvana become the first High Elder Woman of the Celestial Arborists, I knew that was my path. I want to carve out my own destiny, not have it decided for me. Harriet's eyes sparkled with admiration. But what if you find love along the way? Couldn't you have both? Seraphim sighed softly, standing up to examine her reflection in the mirror. Maybe, but it's a risk. I see how Mother struggled after losing Father. I don't want to open myself up to that kind of pain. The trials in becoming an arborist, it's something I can control, something I can achieve on my own terms. Harriet's expression softened with understanding. But you'll be there for my engagement, right? Even if it's not for another 5 years? Seraphim smiled warmly, turning to face her sister. Of course, Ree. I promise to be there for every bit of your festivities. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Not even if a fallen one snatched me to the outer world would I miss your big day. Harriet laughed, the sound filling the room with warmth. Good, because I'll need you to help me with everything. You're the best at planning, you know. Seraphim chuckled, pulling her sister into a tight hug. I'll be there, I promise. They lingered in the warmth of the hug for a moment longer before slipping under the covers together. As the candles flickered out, the sounds of crickets filled the quiet night. Soon their breathing fell into a soft, steady rhythm, each inhale and exhale syncing with the other. The room grew dark, the edges of the walls softening, the air heavy with stillness. Then a shift, a whisper in the silence, a cool breeze where there was none before. The steady cadence of their breathing seemed to slow, stretching into something deeper, more distant. The soft pulse of the night faded into a dreamy hum, as though the world itself was exhaling, and with it a new world began to unfold. Seraphim found herself standing in a vast, dimly lit ballroom, the air thick with an otherworldly stillness. The soft hum of distant melody swirled in the background, though no musicians were in sight. She was wearing a black silk ball gown, its silver embroidered details catching the flicker of candlelight, making them shimmer like stardust. Her auburn hair, styled in loose waves, cascaded around her shoulders, the top half of it pulled back to leave a few face-framing strands that seemed to catch the light with every delicate movement. Beside her a man appeared, his head bowed low as if emerging from the shadows themselves. His dark hair fell in tousled waves beneath the black masquerade mask that covered his features, leaving only the hint of sharp cheekbones and a mouth that was both firm and inviting. He extended his hand with an elegance that seemed too perfect to be real, the glint of silver on his glove catching the candlelight. Seraphim hesitated, uncertainty stirring beneath the surface, but something in his presence, the way the room seemed to hold its breath, compelled her. She placed her hand in his, her fingers brushing against the coolness of the mask before her being guided gently into his arms. Without a word they moved. They swirled across the dance floor, each step synchronized as if they had danced together for lifetimes. The ghostly melody of the music playing softly, its tempo flowing like the shifting of time itself, was as though the world around them had slowed, becoming a blur of silver and shadows. The candles flickering in rhythm with their movement, the man led her effortlessly, his grip firm but gentle, his presence so commanding that the air itself seemed to bend towards him. She lost herself in the steps, in the fluidity of their dance, the world spinning slowly, hypnotically. Then, on their third turn around the floor, something shifted. The fabric of the moment unraveled, just enough for Seraphim to realize that the man who had held her was gone, his touch replaced by the cool, unfamiliar grip of another. She was spun into his embrace. The sudden motion dizzying, the room's shadows deepening around her. The new man was taller, his features equally obscured by a silver masquerade mask that reflected the candlelight like the surface of a still lake. His eyes, dark and intense, locked with hers for the briefest moment before he guided her into the next rhythm of their waltz. His hands were light but firm, the silken fabric of his gloves brushing against her skin, sending a strange warmth through her chest. Before Seraphim could fully comprehend the change, the man in the silver mask swept her into a turn. The air around them thickened, and with sudden fluidity, he pulled her close, closer than before, until their bodies were pressed together, heat radiating from his chest into hers. His hand slid down her spine with a masterful grace, and without warning, he dipped her backward into the void of the dance floor. The room seemed to spin as her body arced, her head dipping dangerously close to the ground, her breath catching in her throat. The edges of her vision blurred, the cold floor beneath her fading into the soft, surreal hum of music, which grew sharper, more demanding with each passing note. She could barely keep herself tethered to the moment, her breath ragged and quick as the man in the silver mask held her in that suspended, weightless position. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. Her pulse raced. His strong hands pulled her back up with an almost impossible ease. Her chest pressed against his once more. The space between them crackled with a strange energy, and she found herself once again in his arms, swept away by the rhythm, the music, the force of their dance. As the dance continued, a strange rhythmic pattern began to emerge. Each time they passed, the ballroom seemed to shift, a subtle pull in the air that made the world feel as though it were spinning just a little too quickly. On the third turn around the floor, Seraphim found herself back in the arms of the first man, the one in the black mask. His presence was as commanding as before, but this time his touch felt colder, more distant, as if he were both with her and somewhere far away. His masked face remained a blur in her periphery, his identity just out of reach. She blinked, trying to clear the disorienting fog that had settled in her mind, but the melody carried her forward, and soon enough she was spun once more. 3 more turns, and the man in the silver mask appeared again, his eyes flashing with that same mysterious intensity. He guided her with quiet assurance, but there was something more fleeting in his movements, as though he were dissolving into the air with each step they took. His touch lingered just long enough to be comforting before she was swept away once more. The cycle began again. 3 turns, and the black-masked man was there once more. Seraphim's heart beat quickened, the rhythm of the dance almost suffocating it in its precision. Each time they met, she was pulled deeper into the dance, closer until their lips almost touch. Every third pass, the man with the black mask returned, as if their dance was predestined, as if she was always meant to find her way back to him. The silver-masked man would come and go like the wind, his touch so light it felt like a memory fading in the distance, teasing at possibilities. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows across the floor, growing darker with each rotation. Seraphim could no longer tell if the floor beneath her feet was real or if she was gliding on something far more ephemeral. The music, though it seemed to echo from every corner of the ballroom, now felt faint, like it was coming from far beneath the earth, as if the dance itself were pulling her into a place she couldn't escape. She wanted to speak, to ask who they were, what they wanted, but the words were lost in the swirling rhythm. Instead, she continued to spin, each turn bringing her face to face with one of the 2 masked men, as though some invisible force had tethered her to this strange, endless dance. The room around her seemed to stretch like liquid, the edges of the walls dissolving into an endless blackness. For a moment, she thought she saw a doorway in the distance, faint and dim, like a silver light on the horizon. But before she could even move toward it, the next rotation brought her back to the same face, the same touch, the same masks, as though the very space between her and the door had vanished. The morning sun painted long streaks of light across the east side of the mother tree, casting intricate shadows on the training grounds. Wooden staves cracked against each other in rhythmic thuds reverberating through the surrounding forest. Seraphim, sweat dripping from her brow, clenched her teeth as she squared off against Leon, her body aching from the morning's relentless drills. "Focus, Seraphim!" Leon's voice cut through the air, calm but firm. "You're letting your guard down." Seraphim tightened her grip on the staff, trying to ignore the fatigue in her arms. She lunged forward, aiming for his side. Leon countered smoothly, blocking her strike and nearly knocking her off balance with quick and precise counter. Gritting her teeth, she recovered and launched another attack, determined not to let him see her falter. "Better," Leon said with a nod, stepping back slightly. "But you still need to be quicker." her mind whirred, trying to analyze his movement. But something pulled at her attention. Across the field, Alaron Valerius had appeared, speaking with one of the other elders. His presence was hard to miss. There was a commanding air about him, even when he wasn't trying. Seraphim's heart skipped a beat, and for a moment she lost her focus entirely. Seraphim! Leon's sharp tone snapped her back to the moment, but not in time. His staff struck her leg and she stumbled, barely managing to stay upright. Sorry, she mumbled, a flush of embarrassment creeping into her cheeks. Leon lowered his staff and raised an eyebrow. What's got you so distracted? It's nothing, Seraphim replied quickly, trying to hide the fact that she'd been glancing at Alaron. She shifted her grip on the staff, determined to regain her focus. Let's go again. Leon didn't press the issue. He nodded, raising his staff in a defensive stance. Seraphim braced herself and launched into another round of attacks, pushing herself harder. She started to feint to his right, then quickly shifted to his left, hoping to catch him off guard. Leon blocked each move effortlessly, his staff moving with precision. Seraphim felt her muscles burning, but she refused to slow down. Her staff cracked against his, and the force sent vibrations through her arms. Sweat trickled down her neck, but she pressed on, ducking under a sweeping strike and tapping Leon's ribs with her staff. He grunted in acknowledgement, stepping back to reassess his next move. They circled each other, their eyes locked in silent challenge. Seraphim's breath was quick and shallow, her chest tight from exertion, but she wasn't going to back down. She lunged again, this time unleashing a flurry of strikes that Leon blocked with rapid, deft movements. Her staff blurred as she moved, each strike more desperate than the last. Leon deflected her final strike and swept low with his staff. Seraphim barely managed to jump back, avoiding the blow. Her heart pounded in her chest, the tension between them growing with each moment. Nice try, Leon said, his voice slightly more strained now. But you're still not reading my movements. Seraphim flashed a grin and wiping a hand across her forehead. She was about to retort when her gaze flickered back toward Alaron. He had moved closer now, standing at the edge of the training grounds, watching her with that same unreadable expression. The weight of his attention pulled at her again, and before she could refocus, Leon struck. His staff hooked behind her legs, and in one swift motion, Seraphim found herself crashing to the ground. Focus, Leon said again, offering his hand to pull her up. Seraphim groaned, taking his hand and standing. Her muscles screamed in protest, but she couldn't help the smile that tugged at the corners of her mouth. I know, I'll do better. You always say that, Leon teased, but there was no malice in his words. He twirled his staff and resumed his stance. One more round. Seraphim nodded, adjusting her grip. Despite the soreness in her arm, she wasn't about to quit now. She and Leon circled each other again, their footfalls soft on the worn ground. Her mind was racing, trying to stay in the moment, but the distraction of Alaron's presence lingered at the edges of her thoughts. She fought to push it aside, focusing solely on Leon's movements. This time she was quicker. She feinted a strike to his right, forcing Leon to shift, and immediately spun low, aiming at his legs. Her staff connected and Leon stumbled. Without hesitation, Seraphim pressed her advantage, launching a series of rapid strikes that drove Leon towards the edge of the training circle. For a brief, exhilarating moment, she was certain she'd won. But then out of the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of Alaron again. The distraction was small, just a flicker, but it was enough. Leon saw the momentary hesitation and swept his staff under her legs again. She hit the ground, a thud echoing in the quiet clearing. Leon chuckled, stepping back and offering his hand once more. You're improving, he said, pulling her to her feet, but you really need to stop getting distracted. Seraphim sighed, brushing dirt from her training uniform. I know, she muttered, her eyes involuntarily drifting back toward where Alarin stood, his presence still lingering on her mind. His gaze had always had a way of pulling her focus, no matter how hard she tried to resist it. Leon caught the look and smirked. "It won't happen again, huh?" he teased, stepping closer and lowering his voice. "Are you sure about that? Because where I'm standing, looks like a certain someone's already gotten into your head." Seraphim's cheeks flushed, and she quickly snapped her attention back to Leon, trying to hide her embarrassment. "That's not—" "Relax, Sarah," Leon interrupted with a chuckle, giving her a playful pat on the shoulder. "Just remember, during the trials, distractions like that will cost you everything." She narrowed her eyes at him, though she couldn't deny the truth in his words. "I know," she repeated, more determined this time. "It won't happen again." "Better not," Leon said, still grinning. "Because Aileron might be fun to look at, but he won't be able to save you when the real tests start." They stood in silence for a moment, both catching their breath. The training session had taken its toll on her, but Seraphim felt a sense of pride, too. Despite the distraction, she had held her own against Leon, and that was something. "I think we're done for today," Leon finally said, tossing his staff to the side. He stretched, wincing slightly as he worked out the tension in his muscles. "You've earned a break." Seraphim smiled, grateful for the reprieve. As she gathered her things, she couldn't resist one last glance in Aileron's direction. He was still there, though now speaking with one of the elders, his expression thoughtful. Something about him stirred a quiet curiosity within her, but she pushed it aside, shaking her head. There would be time for thoughts of Aileron later. For now, she needed to rest. The trials were fast approaching, and she couldn't afford to let anything or anyone distract her.